Hi there my friends, welcome back to my channel. I just want to say I'm sorry if my voice is a little croaky today. It's not the microphone, I'm just getting over a cold virus, so please bear with me. So I don't know about you, but I hate wasting art materials, and when I opened my little Stay Wet palette, I was surprised to find that these acrylic gouache paints were still wet after a couple of weeks being boxed away. So I decided I'd just create a little project for you with them. So I took a piece of scrap watercolour paper. I don't know the brand because it was in my scrap drawer. I do know that it's £140 in weight with a rough textured surface. So taped it down to a board, wet it all over, and then began to apply the paint wet into wet. I'm using golden Taklon brushes, a little set that I got from B&M for, I believe it was 10 brushes for £4.99. I'll link them in the description below, as well as the Stay Wet palette. So just getting a feel for the paints again. When I used them a couple of weeks ago to do the 4 little bookmarks, that is on my YouTube channel, and that's the first time I'd used these paints. Really happy with them. They dry really quick and they're quite opaque. So just going on there, just getting a little bit of texture into the background before I sketch on the pine cone. Just going backwards and forwards, making some marks, and because the paper is still wet, the marks bleed out slightly, so gives you a nice soft effect. So using the brush, this is a flat brush I'm using at the minute, and just holding it so only the very tips of the fibres touch the paper. So you just go backwards and forwards. Real fun. Okay, so I'd got a rough background in, then went on and sketched in the pine cone. You can just about see it, and then began by adding some darker pigment strokes to the background, coming forward as it were. So from the background moving forward towards the sketch that I'd put in. By now the paper's completely dry, so I did dry it with a hairdryer before I put in those pine needles in at the back. And when working on dry paper, I know that the edges of the brush strokes are going to be much cleaner, much neater. But you can go backwards and forwards. Obviously this is acrylic gouache, so if I put water on top of what I've already painted, nothing's going to shift. So if I did want to make the background needles a little bit softer looking, I could go on with water first, then apply the paint on top. So just moving through the painting now, moving from the background to the foreground, so working the pine needles from the back to the front, and just putting a little bit of a darker tone in there, and it's just so I don't lose where each of those pine needles are going to be. Now at the moment there's not a lot of definition and obviously not a lot of contrast, but that's going to be built up gradually. And sorry for not keeping the board still, but we do what we have to. Going in with the lights now and just defining the edges. And where I've gone over with the light colours, I'm just glazing a yellowish green on top of that just to soften it back down. Obviously once it's dry I can go backwards and forwards adding highlights, glazing them if I need to until I build up the intensity of colour or the amount of contrast that I'm after. I just had a coughing fit, so thank goodness this microphone's got a mute button. So I'm not using black at all during the process of this painting, just using the colours that I've got on the palette. I did add 2 little drops of red, a warmish red and a cool red, and a little dropper of yellow as well. Now going in and defining some of the twig that the actual cone is growing on. So also this is beginning to add contrast, which is lovely. So you want more contrast towards the front of the painting, nearer to the viewer, less contrast as you go backwards into the midground and then background. Working further down onto the cone now and allowing some of the background colour to peek through. And there isn't going to be a lot of talking because I keep having coughing fits and having to press the mute button. But it's all very self-explanatory. So as I said earlier, I'm not going to be using black. So I mixed up a nice dark tone using the dark green, the purple, a little bit of the red and the yellow, and that's the red nearest to the green, the cool red. And by using a limited palette like this, it just unifies the whole painting instead of bringing in extra colours. I've already decided that the light is going to be coming in from the right hand side, so I'm going to make the tones on the left hand side cooler and the tones on the right hand side warmer. when painting anything like this from nature, it's ideal to keep in mind that you're not painting a pine cone, you're painting abstract shapes. Just makes it easier to pick out the details, or your mind will take over and think it knows what a pine cone looks like when actually it doesn't. So just look at your reference image if you're using one, or your materials that are in front of you. Maybe you've got a flower in front of you, or a pine cone, or a leaf, and just look for the abstract shapes. And I'm putting the darks in first, then the medium tones, and then the lights in at the end. Just let me know if you like seeing the palette on screen, or would you rather me be zoomed in more on the actual project itself. This is something, yeah, I want to play around with and see. If you do like seeing the palette, I might start recording the actual palette with a separate camera and then just drop it down into the corner and zoom in on the project a little more. But if you let me know what you like, and then I will go with the majority. Just adding a few warmer tones to this side. I wasn't sure if I was going to do that or not. As I said earlier, I was going to keep the left hand side to cool tones, But just looking at reference and some cones I had in front of me, they do catch the light in unusual ways. So I thought I'd add a few warm tones along the bottom half on the left hand side, and if I didn't like it, I could alter it, you know, and make it cooler again. So just building up the intensity of the contrast. If you're going to go with anything in a painting and push it a little bit, then contrast is the way to go. Now adding some lights to the right hand side where the pine cone would be catching the light. If I go on too light, I can always glaze over it with a thinned down version of a different colour once it's dry. So engrossed in this little painting that I hadn't even realised the sun had started to come through the window and shine on the project, but I do pull the blind down in a minute so it doesn't affect the video too much. Now just applying some of the white gouache with the cotton wool bud. These are paper cotton wool buds, so no plastic or anything like that. The whole thing is made from cotton and a paper stem, so environmentally friendly. And I do reuse them. That will just be kept to one side now and be used for something else. But I do prefer just starting this off with a cotton wool bud, and it stops me from fiddling too much. If I go on and start applying it with a brush, I tend to fiddle and it doesn't look so natural. But by applying little blobs of paint and moving them around the surface of the paper just with the cotton wool bud, I just think it adds a little bit more realism. And obviously no paintbrush marks in the paint either. And now mixing up a thinned down version of the white, so I can just tap on a little bit of texture, so snow flurries or things like that we're all going to be getting at some point during the latter part of the year or the beginning of next year. And yeah, this would make a nice little greeting card for Christmas or something like that. So just nice to have a play with a small project and use up your art materials in the process. Now by now I was realising that the top of the painting wasn't dark enough, and once everything was dry I do go on and start darkening that, and you'll see that in a minute. So wetting the surface of the paper and then just going on, and because I've wet that part of the paper with clean water, I know that any brush marks I put on now are going to be ones that have soft edges, so I don't want anything too drastic up there. I just know that I need to darken the top of the painting and add in a little bit more texture at the same time. Sorry about my hand being in the way, but I'm trying to use the very tip of the brush. I don't want any wide brush strokes, and that's just, yeah, an easy way of controlling your brushes, just by having it vertical and just using the very tip. Any wider brush strokes may have been too obvious in the finished painting, so just trying to keep just the tip of the brush on the paper. And you could do this with a flat brush or a filbert. I just had that round to hand, and then just adding in some of this snowdrops, that's a flower, snowflakes, and adding a little bit more white texture in. And even though this is acrylic gouache, it did clean off the work surfaces really easy, just with a wet paper towel. Now working on dry paper, so I dried everything off with a hairdryer, then using a very watery mix again, started going on and adding a little bit more texture, and because the paper is now dry, the edges of the brush marks are going to be a lot cleaner, less fuzzy, so as though these pine needles that I'm putting on now are closer to the viewer than the diffused ones in the background. Okay, so everything's dry now, and I'm going to be going on with 4 pens, and they are Pentel Energel Liquid Gel Ink. I'm reading it off the pen. They're 0.7 millimeters, and it's a ball tip. They're brilliant. They're just coloured liquid gel from Pentel, and it's nice just to add a little bit of detail towards the end that I didn't add with the paints. Yeah, I'm finding it really difficult to get my words out today, so sorry that there's not been a lot of audio input from me today, but I'm sure you didn't want me to be coughing all the way through this half-hour video. So I used a brown, a yellow, orange and green just to finish it off. I don't know if they're water soluble or not, I haven't tried, so yeah, if in doubt, try on a scrap piece of paper first, and that goes with all art mediums. If you're unsure about how to use an art medium or where to use it or anything like that, just try it on a scrap piece of paper, see if it reacts with water. If it doesn't, see if you can erase things or if you can't, and it just gives you a little bit of added security, I guess, instead of jumping straight in with a new medium onto an existing project. But this was just a little bit of a playtime. I think the whole painting took an hour and a half. Yeah, and it was really enjoyable. Had plenty of coffee on the go and throat lozenges. And yeah, had a lovely time. Thank you if you've made it through to the end. I really appreciate you all. Please hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon, hopefully with a throat that's back to normal. Take care, and bye bye for now. Bye bye.